Hi everyone, my name is Arjun from Purdue University. Excited to be here today to talk to you about research done in collaboration with Professor Habiba Farrukh from UC Irvine, Eliz Tekcan, and Professor Berkay Celik. So today I'll be talking about our work on understanding the security and privacy implications of online toxic content on refugees. Now, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the UNHCR, defines a refugee as someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin due to a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, and/or nationality. Now, the UNHCR estimates that the global refugee population in 2024 has exceeded over 43 million, and this community is a vulnerable population for a variety of reasons, such as the economic hardships they face and the lack of support they receive when they first arrive at the country they flee to. Now, the socio-political turmoil in many countries has resulted in refugee crises across the world. And because of this, this centers this population in a lot of online discourse on social media platforms such as Twitter or X and Facebook. Now, as is the case with a lot of online discourse, this discourse can be benign, with online users expressing support or sympathy for this community. But as is the case, with every single online discourse, this discourse can also be embedded with negative and toxic rhetoric, where refugees' identities as refugees are targeted, an attack we refer to as the toxic content attack. Now, in one of our prior works, we demonstrate the prevalence of toxicity against refugees, and we do this by curating a data set of over 10,000 toxic posts against refugees on Twitter or X across 7 different languages. Now, with stratified sampling and human annotation, we label over 1,000 of these tweets to reveal that among the toxicity targeting refugees, compound attacks, so these are attacks with multiple different types of toxicity, such as trolling and doxing, are the most prevalent forms of toxicity. And this compound attack prevalence this trend is consistent across different languages. So this brings me to the research gap and motivation of our work. So we built on a lot of excellent research done for at-risk users and refugee security and privacy. And given that our prior work shows that toxic content against refugees is prevalent and global, this still leaves much left to be explored in this space. Specifically, there's a lack of work understanding how toxicity affects refugees' security and privacy behaviors and what S&P actions they may take in response. Now, with this research gap in mind, we formulate a research goal focused on answering, what are the impacts of toxic content exposure on refugees and the corresponding security and privacy measures they take. So, given the framing of our research question, I'm sure you're aware this warrants a user-centered data collection protocol. But our data collection faced quite a bit of challenge because refugees were a vulnerable population. Specifically, we had 4 main barriers. The first being they're a hard-to-reach population. The second being coordinating with NGOs was not easy, given at the time of recruitment, NGOs were overburdened due to two refugee crises from Ukraine and Afghanistan. Third, discussion of a sensitive topic can limit and impede recruitment, and the same goes for language barriers. So given these data collection challenges, we actually opted for a mixed methods approach, specifically focusing on 3 user-centered data collection methods. Now, these data collection methods spanned over the course of one year, resulting in the recruitment of over 60 participants, 68 participants to be exact. Now, we first conducted in-depth semi-structured interviews with liaisons. So these are people who work closely with refugees. And this was valuable not only because they gave insight on our research goal and research questions, but this was an entry point for us to reach a hard-to-reach population. And liaisons were the ones who also helped inform subsequent data collection methods, specifically advising us to conduct focus groups and surveying refugees. Now, given that this was a sensitive topic, focus groups were extremely beneficial because they help alleviate the discomfort that arises when discussing a sensitive topic. Now, to be more specific, when one refugee participant in a focus group was comfortable sharing a toxic content interaction or experience, this promotes some sort of camaraderie among other refugee participants, making the conversation a lot easier. And finally, we also surveyed refugees. Now, this was important because we wanted to collect data from participants who wish to remain anonymous as well. So in this slide here, I have an overview of the semi-structured interview liaisons. So they were diverse in terms of profession, regions where they worked, and the people they liaised with. So we talked to 2 lawyers, 1 doctor, 3 academics who had done field research with refugees, and 6 NGO workers. They worked in 4 regions: Turkey, Spain, Bulgaria, and the United States, and liaised with refugees from 4 different regions: the Middle East, Africa, Asia, and South America. Now, when it comes to focus groups, we conducted 9 focus groups in total with 27 participants. And these focus groups were typically led by 1 focus group lead. And in the case of language barriers, they were led by one focus group lead and 1 translator. And they varied in settings and composition. So we talked to 1 refugee family, 1 student group in a language school, and 7 focus groups comprised of people participating in NGO-provided lessons. Now, finally, for surveying refugees, we translated our English language survey into 4 additional languages upon the advice of our liaisons: Arabic, Urdu, Turkish, and Spanish, and surveyed the opinions and perspectives of 29 refugees from diverse backgrounds. Now, here I wanted to note that we had incomplete demographics because many participants chose not to self-disclose demographics. And this was in line with our expectations, given that participants who wanted to remain more anonymous were the ones who were more than likely to complete the survey. But yet we were still confident of data quality, given that liaisons were the ones to specifically distribute the survey. So as is the case with most qualitative research, our findings covered a lot of breadth. We uncovered unique social media dependencies refugees have, how they uniquely interact with toxic content, the actions they take in response to toxic content, and the different goals they have for these actions, the different types of barriers they face in enacting security and privacy mechanisms, and also their perspectives on platform mitigation, how platforms can help improve toxic content moderation. Now, in the interest of time, I'm only going to present 3 facets of our findings: social media dependency, interactions with toxic content, and barriers. And even within these 3 facets, only a portion of these findings. And I encourage everyone to read the full paper for a full picture. So jumping right into social media dependency. Now, we discovered that refugees leverage and use social media for reasons beyond than just leisure and recreation. Specifically, there were two pertinent dependencies that had arisen for them. The first one being for reunification. Now, NGOs refer to reunification as this rejoining of friends and families separated by the refugee crisis. So when you have members of a group who are in different stages of migration, they become physically separated. And being on social media, having that digital connection facilitates future physical reunification. Now, the second dependency was for aid and support. They depended on social media for aid and support. And this was because a lot of NGOs partake in online communities, be it in public or private groups in online spaces like Facebook. And refugees depend on these groups because NGOs provide aid to them through these groups, specifically giving them pertinent information like how to file for taxes, how to receive aid, how to file paperwork, and that sort of things. So moving on to toxic content interaction. Again, like I mentioned, we cover a lot of breadth in our full paper, but I wanted to briefly touch on one theme the one very interesting theme that arose in our analysis, which is the impact of intersectional identity in toxic content experiences. Now, intersectionality is a social science framework, but in the context of our research, it refers to how the presence of additional sensitive identifiers beyond the refugee's identity on their online platform can exacerbate threats. Now, specifically, these are additional sensitive identities like sexual orientation and gender, or even language, culture, and religion. Now, to illustrate, I'll present this quote by one liaison we talked to who spoke about Block 13 Kakuma in Kenya. Now, Block 13 Kakuma refers to a refugee camp in Kenya that's specifically designated to house LGBTQ+ refugees. So this liaison here noted how, despite there being other camps in the region, Block 13 Kakuma faced a heightened level of vitriol and toxic content exposure. Now take this quote, for example, where they said, someone, an attacker, came onto a post that was advocating for the evacuation of LGBTQ+ refugees to prevent persecution and attacked a refugee that was tagged in the post, highlighting how this their additional identities compound in their vulnerability. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about barriers. So we uncovered two main barriers to enacting security and privacy mechanisms that refugees face. I'll be talking about one of them, the privacy-utility trade-off. Now, the privacy-utility trade-off, the privacy-utility trade-off can apply to many different types of users, but we found that because of their circumstances, refugees faced a heightened version of this privacy-utility trade-off because they not only use social media, they depend on social media. So again, take this quote from the same liaison who talked to us about Block 13 Kakuma. And here they said, most people I know don't necessarily put Kakuma on their profile, and without that, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell, preventing others from reaching out. Now here the liaison is noting how adding this sensitive identifier of being from Block 13 Kakuma puts a target on your back. But scraping that identifier from your online presence can also have issues because it prevents other aid workers or people who may want to provide support from reaching out to said person. So giving you an illustration of how they have to balance privacy and dependency on social media for support. Now, again, I presented a very brief subset of findings from our work. My focus today was to only provide a teaser, and I hope you all have a chance to read the full paper where we go into a lot of detail about how they have different actions and how different actions correspond to different goals, such as discouraging toxicity, protecting their anonymity, and other privacy-preserving methods. But now I'm nearing the end of my talk. So in summary, I wanted to say that we conducted a mixed method approach to investigate the different security and privacy implications of online toxic content against the refugee population. And our study provides interesting highlights on how refugees have different circumstances, and these different circumstances lead to very unique dependencies and different behaviors on online platforms, and that existing security and privacy mechanisms can be difficult to enact for refugees. And this brings me to the end of my presentation, and thank you everyone for your time, and I'll gladly take any questions.